Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. We are in the glorious city of Dubai. Behind me, you should be able to see the Burj Khalifa. We are filming here from what is supposedly, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the tallest hotel in the world. However, it's not true in a way that you would care about. If they measure a building that is all hotels, so anyway, you can go and stay at the Ritz-Carlton in Hong Kong, which is actually technically higher, but they don't count it because there's only like 17 floors of hotel rooms. But anyway, enough about that. Because we're here, it seems like a perfect opportunity to describe what is fairly popular. We've been helping a lot of people lately set up UAE companies and get UAE residency. So I'm going to describe a little bit about the process. I've done some other videos a bit on UAE. Right now, it's super popular, probably in part because of the fact that it is one of the few really clean zero tax jurisdictions in the world. It's not necessarily so amazing if you're outside of here, but if you're willing to be here, it's fantastic from a tax standpoint. So we're going to go through discussing what's involved in setting everything up, how long it takes, what the steps are, etc., etc. What might be useful here, what might not be useful here, and go into that. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, check out our other videos. We try and produce great content for you every single day, so I hope you enjoy that. And if you're interested in help with any of these things, we help people with international structuring, international relocation, etc., as well as not just the strategy of what to do, but also how to do it. So you can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com, or you can book a call with me, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. There's a link in the description below. Okay. So as I've mentioned in a previous video, when you're setting up in UAE, there's basically three types of companies you can set up. The first is international companies. That's kind of like an offshore company. Usually we don't do that because the banking is not so great. Then there's free zone companies. That's the majority of what we do and what we've pretty much always been doing, because then there's the third type, which are onshore companies. However, onshore companies have traditionally required a large portion local ownership, which requires some complicated side agreements and things like this. So unless you had to actually sell to Emiratis, or people sell within UAE, which usually people are not talking about, it was not that useful. Now they've changed the regulations effective, I think it was November, December, something like that, that now you can have wholly owned onshore companies, but still we're not usually doing that for a variety of reasons. Usually we're talking about free zone companies. And what's the appeal of free zone companies? Okay, so first of all, we can get local banking. That's very good. Number two, you can get residency permits, and you can do that fairly easily, okay? Now, you don't have to do that. In theory, you could have a company here without having a residency permit, or without actually having living here. But if you want to have local banking, then basically you need to do that. So usually what we're doing is we're doing it all as one encompassed package, where we're saying, okay, great, you're setting up the company, you're getting a residency permit, you're getting domestic banking, usually both personal and business, which is pretty good quality banking. And so yeah, tends to be good for a lot of people. Now, sometimes we also have to set up foreign banking because maybe you want cryptocurrency transactions and they're not crypto friendly at all in UAE, so not good. There's other types of business that maybe you wouldn't want to have domestically, so you'd have kind of a buffer or layer or something like that. Anyway, that's case by case. So the first thing is usually we're setting up a free zone company. Second is we have to choose the free zone. Now there's like 34 free zones or something like that in UAE. We're usually interested in keeping the costs as low as possible, so kind of making it as efficient as possible. Some of them are kind of prestigious free zones. They put higher standards on you. You have to have office space with employees and things like this, audited financial statements that are submitted every year. Usually we want to avoid that. We want to say, let's go to the minimum. And the minimum, you pretty much always, you can't get away with having no quote unquote office space, but you can often have what's called a Flexi desk. Okay, so a Flexi desk is basically there's a shared office space that you have access to, and it just gets included in the cost of the package. You don't have to worry about complicated leases or anything like that. Sometimes these are actually remarkably good. They've got all sorts of pretty cool services. For example, a recording studio, ability to use printers, places for meeting rooms to meet people, etc. But often they're not in a place that's super convenient for you. So whether you're actually going to use it is questionable. That being said, you have to have it. So that's part of it. So anyway, you have to choose. And there's a few different free zones that are perfectly reasonable. We tend to go with a few just because we find them to be most efficient and lowest cost. So that's that. Once you select the free zone, what do you have to do? You have to, of course, pay. You're going to have to get a license, okay? And so this is a little bit different about UAE. They'll typically have all kinds of licenses for different activities. Now, in practice, this doesn't usually affect you that much because licenses are fairly broad, and in practice, you can do all kinds of business through them. But whereas some places, you get a business license, and you're allowed to do everything that's not excluded by that license. Here it's kind of the opposite. So maybe you'll get a consulting license, maybe you'll get some sort of license for online business. Some of them are a little bit more complicated. You have like something education related, and then they put you through all sorts of rigmarole. So usually we're going to try and fit you into the license that is easiest for you. And this license is going to determine what the substance requirements are. So for instance, if you have like an investment holding company, then that's typically not so great. So maybe you'll get like an investing consulting company, right? And in practice, it's going to be the same thing, but the difference is one is more expensive and comes with some substance requirements, another one does not. So it's not entirely straightforward which license you should choose, but if you need help, reach out to us. Happy to help you on that. So you're going to choose the license. Now we come down to this thing where you have to have a security check, okay? So what happens as part of the process is if you haven't already been to UAE, then they do this security clearance thing through the immigration department. That will take a bit of time. So if you have been to UAE, what you're going to do is you're going to send a copy of your passport with a photo of your entry stamp, and they'll have already done this check on you, and so then it's very fast, right? You're going to submit your names for the company, they're going to get approved, you're going to go through and everything can be done online, everything can be done remotely. Super easy in that respect. You don't have to worry about apostilling documents and sending them in. You don't have to worry about signing some paper and couriering it or anything like that. Very straightforward to get set up and running. So you go through that process. You now get your business formed. You have your security clearance, etc. Next is to go on to getting a residency permit. Again, you don't necessarily have to get a residency permit. Usually when you're getting a business, you can choose to have how many visas you want with it, and you can also choose to get a longer term for your business. Okay, so by default, it would be like a 1-year business license, but you could extend to 3 years or something, and there's cost savings to doing that. Usually you're avoiding some renewal costs, you're just gonna save money. So if you're thinking long term, you might say, hey, listen, I'm gonna go for a 3-year, okay? Perfectly fine. It's similar regardless. And then maybe you want multiple different people to have visas, so you can pay for a license that includes multiple visas. It's a slight increase in cost. It's very similar though. Where this is sometimes applicable is, let's say you're going to move to UAE with a family. You can say include a spouse and then kids underneath your visa once you get it. But sometimes it's easier just to say, okay, great, I'm going to include, say, my spouse as a separate visa connected with the company. So case by case, but something to be aware of. When you go through that process, now when you come to UAE, you need to do a medical, and this medical needs to be done in UAE. It needs to be done according to the UAE standards, etc. You go through that process, you get approved. After that, you have something called the stamping process. You need to go through the stamping process, and then you can go and you can get your residency permit. You have to convert your existing visa, like your tourist visa, to a residency visa, and then you're done. That's your company formation. So I would say that the actual forming the company itself is fairly quick. That can be done in like a week-ish, right? Give or take, depending on how on it you are. Going through the process of getting the medical approved, doing the stamping, etc. In total, that process is probably going to take about a month. You probably need about 2 weeks in UAE, okay? About that much time. Then from the time that you are done that, then you can go to banks. Personal banks, fairly quick. Business banks take a long time. So that's one thing to consider. Now, keep in mind, because the order of operations is you get the company formed, then you go through the medical and stamping to get the residency permit, right? Then you go and you would normally say, okay, now I'm going to open bank accounts. Now those bank accounts are UAE bank accounts. You can actually start setting up foreign bank accounts as soon as the company is formed. So we sometimes do this with clients. Sometimes there's a situation where maybe, again, you need something to do with crypto, right? Or for some reason you want to access, say, the European SEPA payment system, right? So we're going to, as soon as the company is set up, then we're going to start forming or opening business bank accounts for that company abroad. So that's pretty much the overview. If you're interested in, hey, listen, moving to UAE, getting a residency permit in UAE, setting up companies in UAE, or if you'd like to find if that's the right solution for you, if there's some other solution, please reach out to me. Again, you can book a call, cordate.fm/Michael Rosmer, the link in the description below. Or you can hit our subscribe button, notification bell, check out some of our other videos. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If not, please let me know why. Share it with your friends, and I'm going to see you guys on the next video.